You know that strange, almost disorienting moment when the room is full of laughter, voices overlapping, phones lighting up with the next thing, and you are smiling on the outside, while a quieter, more precise part of your mind has already begun to dissect the entire scene? You notice the slight tension in someone's jaw when they force a joke. You register how the conversation skims across the surface of something that actually matters. You feel the subtle distance between what is being said and what is being felt. And for a few seconds you wonder, not for the first time, whether you are the only person in the room who is experiencing the moment in high resolution, while everyone else is watching it in standard definition. That moment is not social awkwardness. It is not superiority. It is not a flaw that needs fixing. It is the unmistakable signature of a deep thinker's mind. If you have spent years feeling that you process life at a different bandwidth, noticing patterns others miss, lingering on questions long after the group has moved on, carrying an inner world that feels denser and more layered than the conversations around you, then what follows is written for you. This is not another list of personality traits or a romanticized tribute to overthinkers. This is a serious, grounded exploration of the psychology of deep thinkers, how this cognitive style actually works, why it can feel both like a quiet superpower and a persistent burden, and what some of the most perceptive psychologists in history observed when they studied minds that refused to stay on the surface. We will move slowly and carefully. The culture we live in across the United States, the United Kingdom, Canada, Australia, Germany, and most of the modern West has little patience for slow attention. It rewards speed, certainty, and the rapid production of opinion. Deep thinking operates on a different clock. If you have ever been told you think too much, or that you should just relax and stop analyzing everything, you already know the friction. Today we are going to examine that friction with honesty and precision, because understanding it changes how you carry yourself in the world. Deep thinking is not the same as high intelligence, although the two often travel together. Intelligence is the capacity to process information efficiently. Deep thinking is a particular orientation of attention. It is the sustained willingness to let a thought continue unfolding long after the first, second, or even third answer has appeared. Most minds treat thoughts the way we treat notifications. They glance, they react, they swipe away. A deep thinker's mind treats a thought more like an unexpected guest who arrives at the door late in the evening. You open the door. You invite it in. You sit with it. You ask it questions. Sometimes it stays for hours. Sometimes it returns, changed. Weeks or years later, William James, one of the founders of modern psychology, described consciousness as a stream. For deep thinkers, that stream runs deeper and carries more sediment. Ideas do not simply appear and vanish. They eddy, gather weight, and gradually reshape the inner landscape. Carl Jung expressed the same reality with characteristic sharpness. Who looks outside, dreams. Who looks inside, awakes. Deep thinkers are the ones who keep looking inside even when the culture is shouting for them to look outward, to perform, to produce, to keep pace. This inward orientation creates a subtle but persistent mismatch with the environments most of us inhabit. In workplaces across North America and Europe, the preferred cognitive style is rapid problem-solving under time pressure. In social settings, the preferred currency is light, reciprocal exchange that moves quickly from one topic to the next. On digital platforms, the preferred unit of attention is measured in seconds. A deep thinker arrives at these arenas still turning over the previous conversation, still noticing the implications that were left unexamined. From the outside, this can look like hesitation, detachment, or even quiet arrogance. From the inside, it feels like simple integrity. You cannot pretend a complex matter is simple merely because the room has already decided to move on. Psychologists who study what is called need for cognition have documented that some people derive genuine intrinsic pleasure from effortful thinking itself. The process is rewarding independent of any external result or social approval. The thinking is not a means to an end. It is, in a real sense, the end. Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi's extensive research on flow states revealed that deep, sustained engagement with complex ideas can produce the same absorbed, timeless quality that elite athletes and artists describe when they are fully immersed. Time compresses. Self-consciousness softens. The mind feels both fully occupied and strangely light. That experience is available to deep thinkers more readily than to those whose attention is trained primarily on external stimulation. There is a critical distinction that the popular culture almost always collapses. Overthinking and deep thinking are not the same phenomenon. Overthinking is repetitive, fear-driven, and closed. It circles the same painful content without generating new insight or opening new possibility. Deep thinking is expansive. It continues to open layers, make new connections, and generate fresh distinctions. One is a closed loop that drains energy. The other is an unfolding that, while sometimes demanding, often leaves the thinker with a quiet sense of having touched something real. From the outside, the two can look identical. From the inside, they feel entirely different. Learning to tell them apart is one of the most important skills a deep thinker can develop. Deep thinkers also tend to possess higher emotional granularity, the capacity to detect and name subtle mixtures of feeling with precision. Where many people register a broad category such as, "I feel bad," or "I feel stressed," a deep thinker may simultaneously notice disappointment, protective tenderness, a thread of grief, a flicker of curiosity about the origin of the feeling, and a quiet evaluation of whether the feeling is proportionate to the situation. This precision is a significant asset for self-understanding and for genuine empathy. It also means that emotional experiences often last longer and cut deeper. The nervous system of a deep thinker is simply processing more data. Daniel Kahneman's work on dual-process cognition helps explain the energy cost of this style. System 1 thinking is fast, automatic, associative, and relatively inexpensive in metabolic terms. System 2 thinking is slow, deliberate, effortful, and metabolically expensive. Deep thinkers spend a disproportionate amount of their conscious life in System 2. They question first impressions. They notice when emotion is coloring perception. They hold multiple perspectives in mind at the same time and examine the tensions between them. That sustained cognitive effort is why many deep thinkers require significant recovery time after social interaction, high stimulation environments, or prolonged decision-making. The brain has been operating at a higher voltage for longer than is typical. Abraham Maslow, in his studies of self-actualizing individuals, observed that many of them shared this reflective quality. They were comfortable with solitude not because they disliked other people, but because their inner world was sufficiently rich and interesting to hold their attention for extended periods. Erich Fromm later examined a related phenomenon in the context of modern alienation. He noted that the person who cannot bear to be alone with their own thoughts is often the one most thoroughly shaped by external noise and social expectation. Deep thinkers, almost by definition, have a higher tolerance and often a higher need for contact with their own inner process. The loneliness that accompanies this cognitive style is rarely the dramatic, cinematic kind. It is quieter and more specific. It is the loneliness of sitting at a lively dinner table in London, or Toronto, or Melbourne, or Berlin, or a suburb of Chicago, and realizing that the conversation will never reach the depth your mind is already exploring. You contribute appropriately. You smile at the right moments. You ask the expected questions. And somewhere inside, a private parallel process continues noticing subtext, weighing implications, sensing the emotional weather of the group. When someone eventually asks whether you are all right, the honest answer would require a conversation the moment cannot hold. So you say you are fine. That small, repeated act of self-editing accumulates over years. Jung understood this tension with unusual clarity. He observed that individuals who live close to their inner life often feel like outsiders even within relationships that are outwardly loving and secure. The privilege of a lifetime, he suggested, is to become who you truly are. For deep thinkers, that process of becoming almost always begins in private, long before it becomes visible to others. The capacity for deep thinking is not fixed at birth in a simple on or off way. It can be strengthened or weakened by the conditions of daily life. When attention is repeatedly fragmented by notifications, rapid content switching, and the cultural expectation of instantaneous response, the mental muscles required for sustained depth begin to atrophy. Silence starts to feel uncomfortable. The mind grows restless when there is nothing new to consume. Many people in their 30s, 40s, and beyond look back and realize that their inner world was once richer, more spacious, more generative. The capacity did not vanish. The environmental conditions that once supported it gradually eroded. So what does a person with this architecture of mind actually do? First, it is essential to stop accepting the cultural verdict that you think too much. Speed is not inherently superior to depth. Certainty is not always wiser than complexity. The preference of the surrounding culture for rapid cognition does not render your slower, more thorough process defective. It simply reveals a mismatch between your natural tempo and the tempo that is currently rewarded. Second, you must deliberately create and protect the conditions your mind requires in order to function at its best. Extended periods without external input. Walks taken without podcasts or music. Journals that will never be shared or optimized for an audience. Conversations with the rare individuals who can remain with a single idea long enough for something genuine to emerge. These are not self-indulgent luxuries. For a deep thinker, they are forms of psychological hygiene, as necessary as sleep or nutrition. Third, you need to develop a reliable internal discrimination between generative depth and unproductive rumination. A practical test used in many reflective and therapeutic approaches is straightforward. If the thinking is producing new understanding, new distinctions, or viable possibilities for action, continue. If it is merely rehearsing a familiar painful narrative without movement or insight, gently change the channel. This discrimination is a skill. It improves with practice and with a certain kindness toward oneself. Carl Rogers placed great emphasis on the idea that the deepest form of understanding arises when a person can listen to their own experience without immediate judgment or evaluation. That capacity is harder to cultivate than it sounds. Most of us carry an inner critic that activates the moment serious reflection begins. Learning to observe thoughts, feelings, and impulses with a measure of neutrality, neither suppressing them nor being swept away by them, is one of the quiet strengths that mature deep thinkers gradually acquire. It is also one of the practices that most reliably converts the potential burden of deep thinking into a source of clarity and steadiness. Deep thinkers often develop over time a heightened sensitivity to incongruence, the gap between what is said and what is meant, between appearance and reality, between a person's stated values and their actual behavior. This sensitivity can make social life more demanding, because the deep thinker registers discrepancies that others overlook or choose not to notice. At the same time, it is the foundation of a particular kind of integrity. People who live with this sensitivity frequently become the ones in a family, a workplace, or a friendship group who can name the unspoken truth when it finally becomes necessary. That role is rarely comfortable. It is often valuable. In the realm of work and contribution, deep thinkers often find their greatest effectiveness not in roles that demand constant rapid output, but in roles that reward careful analysis, long-term pattern recognition, and the ability to hold complexity without forcing premature resolution. Research, strategy, writing, design, counseling, certain forms of leadership, and any domain that requires seeing second- and third-order consequences tend to suit this cognitive style. The challenge is that many modern organizations still undervalue the slower, more thorough work that deep thinkers do best. Learning to articulate the value of that work without apology and without arrogance becomes an important practical skill. The same qualities that allow a person to explore ideas with unusual depth can, under conditions of stress or unresolved emotional material, tip into rumination or heightened anxiety. The distinction again becomes crucial. When thinking is in the service of understanding and possibility, it tends to leave the thinker feeling clearer, even if the clarity is uncomfortable. When thinking is in the service of avoiding feeling or rehearsing threat, it tends to leave the thinker more depleted. Developing the capacity to notice which mode one is in and to shift when necessary is a central part of psychological maturity for this temperament. Some deep thinkers discover that structured reflective practices certain forms of journaling, contemplative inquiry, or dialogue with a skilled therapist help them metabolize the volume of inner material they generate. Others find that physical movement, time in nature, or creative work provides the necessary counterbalance. There is no single prescription. The common element is the recognition that a mind that generates a great deal of content needs reliable ways to process and integrate that content, rather than simply accumulating it. As we move further into an era of artificial intelligence, algorithmic feeds, and accelerating information, the cultural pressure towards shallow cognition is likely to intensify. In that context, the capacity for sustained, independent, non-reactive attention becomes not merely a personal preference, but a form of quiet resistance. The deep thinker who can still sit with a difficult question for an hour, or a day, or a year, without outsourcing the thinking to the nearest available opinion, is preserving something that the broader culture is in danger of losing. This does not mean deep thinkers are morally superior. It means they are oriented toward a form of attention that is currently undervalued and therefore increasingly rare. That orientation carries real costs in energy, in social ease, and sometimes in belonging. It also carries a particular kind of clarity, a capacity for nuance, and a resistance to simplistic narratives that can be of genuine service to the thinker themselves, and, when offered with care, to the people and systems around them. You are not behind. You are not excessive. You are not broken. You are oriented toward a depth of attention that the current environment does not always know how to receive. That orientation requires stewardship. It requires boundaries. It requires the willingness to disappoint the expectations of speed and surface in order to remain faithful to the way your mind actually works. If any part of this long conversation has felt uncomfortably accurate, I would like to hear from you. In the comments, tell me the moment you first recognized that your mind operated differently from most of the people around you, or the thing you most wish others understood about the experience of living with this kind of attention. Those accounts are not trivial. They form a quiet record of a cognitive style that is easy to misunderstand and easy to undervalue. And if this exploration has helped you feel even slightly less alone with the architecture of your own mind, consider sharing it with one other person who might need to encounter it. The deepest thinkers are often the ones least likely to ask for recognition or reassurance. Sometimes the most useful thing we can offer them is the simple, accurate description of what they already live. Protect that inner world of yours. Tend it. Give it the conditions it requires. It is rarer than the culture currently admits, and more necessary than it knows. I will see you in the next one.